I swear I never saw a more perfect evening. It's like a Spielberg movie. Stars as sharp and clear as diamonds, no traffic noise, nothing but the chirping of cicadas and the rustle of a warm podcast through the leaves.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography. One of your hosts, Pierce Line, pronouns they, them, here with, as always,
George Marston, pronouns they, them, and she, her. How the living heck are you, Pierce?
I'm doing as well as I can do in this hell on earth that we call living.
Oh, it's pretty weird. It is. Look, I'm going to get this out of the way right at the top so we can just move on. It's fucking surreal to be reading the arc of Spawn, Armageddon, with all these, like, there's some Iraq war stuff in these issues.
Yep.
While a mere 20 years later, we are going to war in Iran for what the Secretary of State, or as he likes to be called, the Secretary of War, sorry to dead name him.
Yeah, sorry.
The first step in Armageddon, literally use the word Armageddon. So there's a lot to process here. And gosh, I think that's all I can afford to get into it without a panic attack. But I had to acknowledge it. And so
Yeah.
God knows this will come out in about a month or so. Hopefully we'll have podcasts. Hopefully we'll have the internet. Hopefully we'll have, whatever. So let's live it up for now. That's what I've been doing. I've been living my best Sonic the Hedgehog life tonight, eating some super radical chili dogs.
Oh, nice. I don't think I've ever had more than one chili dog in my life.
Like at a time, or just one ever?
Ever.
Oh,
mostly,
really?
Yeah, mostly because I don't think of a hot dog as a vehicle for chili.
Maybe it's a more southern thing, or I guess it's a big Midwest thing too. I love a chili dog. I mean, it's not the only way I get a hot dog, but honestly, if I'm getting two hot dogs any way I like, one of them's going to be a chili dog and the other one's going to be a slaw dog.
For me, it's sauerkraut and mustard.
Fair enough. I mean, that's the classic hot dog. My roommate and I were talking about how mustard goes on a hot dog so perfectly. If I'm getting one topping, it's probably ketchup, because I'm a fucking child at heart.
What's wrong with you?
I just said I'm a child at heart. I have a child's taste a lot of the time.
Ketchup is not whimsical. Mustard is whimsical.
It's juvenile.
Fair. It is just sugar and vinegar and tomato.
I mean, yeah, and that said, mustard is whimsical. Mustard is like what a gnome puts on a bagel.
Yeah. I would put mustard on a bagel. It sounds great.
Depends on the bagel, I guess. Everything bagels. I mean, you put mustard on a pretzel, God knows that's delicious.
Ooh. Now you're speaking my language.
Mustard on a pretzel.
Early shout out. Every Thursday I go play Commander at Eckert Brewing Company. And they have a really, they've got like a German beer hall type situation.
Okay.
Ooh, they got a brat dog. Whew, so good. And the pretzels, excellent. And the things that these people do to potatoes, delicious.
It's great. There is a place in Georgia called Helen, which is a town that the economy was all fucked in like the 70s or sometime in the mid 20th century. And so they did what a lot of towns did and rebuilt and rebranded the town as an alpine village, because it's up in the
this has come up weirdly before on this show.
It probably has. But they just have, it's expensive as fuck, but they have all these like German restaurants, and I'll just sit down and eat like potato pancakes, latkes, which of course delicious Jewish traditional food. Any kind of wurst, a knockwurst they want to throw at me, a bratwurst, any kind of wurst. Their wursts
are the best,
as they say. And yeah, that's somebody's actual thing. God, I'll just eat it. Mustard and sauerkraut and pretzels and pickles. Okay, there's a German cheese called Butterkäse, which is just butter cheese, and it's so smooth and creamy. You put that with like those pretzel crackers or something, a little
Mm,
bit of pickle with that. Now that's delicious.
that sounds great.
That's tasty. Problem with Helen is that it's a huge stronghold for the KKK now.
This is why this has come up before.
Yep. See, it's hard to go there.
Well,
It's pretty close to the Cabbage Patch Hospital, which still exists.
hmm.
Cabbage Patch General, I think it's called. Where you can go watch Cabbage Patch Kids still being born to this day. They're still cranking them out, just like the rest of us millennials. There's just seems to be more of us every day somehow.
Well, if you can't tell, dear listeners, I know we're only a few minutes in, but we're finished with Armageddon as an arc, as a 10-issue arc, and we're gonna get into a little sort
There's
of,
like an epilogue here,
yeah,
as they say.
epilogue issue, and then
Denouement.
something completely different, as Monty Python would say. Um,
Oh boy, let me say right up front before we get any further,
yeah,
even if we might banter some more to avoid getting deeper into the issue, God knows. Um, I have to give my absolute strongest content warning here for violence against women and spousal abuse, and for, let's say, pregnancy trauma.
sure,
And so we are going to do our level best to not dwell on it, but frankly, it is the content of a significant portion of this first issue. So again, we'll try not to dwell on any of it longer than we absolutely have to, and we will warn you up front because it's pretty intense. I'll put it that way. I was kind of upset reading it, and that's tough. So
yeah. As we get it, I didn't love it either, and we talked about it off mic about making sure to trigger warning pretty heavily up top. It is troubling. Let me put it that
yeah,
way.
there's a
Uh,
lot wrong with it. We will get into the impact of the storytelling of it more than we get into, I think, the actual content of the specific,
yeah,
beat by beat information that's on the page. Again, before we get into it, the creative nuts and bolts of these issues are not the problem. The art in both of them is relatively solid. The first one has a very dramatic air. There are a few huge missteps in terms of what it depicts, but again, the creative nuts and bolts of the functional aspects of the script and art work fine, and they work fine together. In particular, Philip Tan and the rest of the art team, regular art team, are doing a fine job. And there are some parts that stand out negatively and positively. And hopefully we'll highlight the positive parts more. And also in the second issue, we'll have some guest creators. And again, functionally, it works generally fine. It's just, boy, there's a lot to unpack in both of these. And it's going to be easier to talk about the effects than the causes in a lot of ways.
yeah, for sure. In both cases, I don't think that they're stories that like shouldn't be told or anything like that, and I can completely understand how we got to where we got to. It is more a maybe, and maybe this becomes more clear as we get deeper into Spawn as a character, but since we do know that we are sort of having Al written out of his own book in the next 20 issues or so, it does feel like it's, if you wanted to pick a place where it feels like the book's written itself into a bit of a corner, it's right here,
Yeah.
in 164.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. And gosh, yeah, it's really kind of a rug pull issue. And I will say, maybe these stories shouldn't exist, but I think that this is the most banal kind of like shouldn't exist. The banality of what happens that makes these, especially this first issue in particular, so just is incredibly grounded in humanity and reality in a way that is jarring on some level, and it feels like a forced way to circle back on some stuff.
Yes. I feel like we probably need to get into it more, if that makes sense.
You know what? Let's fucking rip off the band-aid. Pierce, hit me with the credits for Spawn number 164.
All right, Spawn number 164. Todd McFarlane Image Comics present Homecoming. Story by David Hine, pencils by Philip Tan, inks by Danny Miki and Ryan Wynn, lettering by Tom Warzakowski, colors by Brian Haberlin, Andy Troy, and Ian Hannon, production by Jay Photos and Francis Takanaga, and cover by Greg Capullo. It's a weird cover. It's like a little kid with a Ruffles bag and a bloody knife eating chips. Dedicated to the memory of Drew Posada. Are you familiar?
The name is familiar, but I can't
He's
remember offhand.
a comic book artist. Worked for Top Cow. Did a lot of like pinup stuff.
Okay,
Wildstorm, Extreme Studios. He was an image
sure.
guy, clearly an image guy. And he passed in 2007. So,
Oh, R.I.P.
Yeah.
And yeah, this comic is from 2007, so just under 20 years ago, the themes are coming all the way back around. That cover is demented, and we
Did you
will
just
get.
take a look at it?
Yes, it actually kind of fucking rules. It looks like an Ice Nine Kills album or something, though, like very like edgelord.
Capullo's in such like a weird phase of his career because
This almost looks like a twisted Norman Rockwell painting in the composition
yeah,
and like the posing.
you could kind of just take the blood out and it would seem a lot more normal. But then the
If it
blood,
was just a kid eating chips holding, say, a comic book,
yeah, exactly.
it would look very Americana. And we'll get into who that is theoretically and what that is. And, we'll find out.
When we last saw Spawn, he had saved the world, remade it as he saw fit.
Yes, we have the end times. Armageddon happened, and Spawn remade everything exactly as it was, and abdicated his power.
And yeah, he uses the last bits of his power to become Al again, and he says, "Well, I'm going to return home to Wanda. I'm human. I'm here. This is all over. Let's
Sort
go."
of the mother of miracles, the sort of divine creative force, turns him into Al at his request as his quote unquote reward. And also another important thing to note, because it will come up in these issues, is that the people of Earth do remember that apocalypse happened, that Armageddon happened. They all remember it as like a bad dream that they all shared, with this sense that they know it wasn't a dream.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. I'm like
It's
excited to
interesting.
see how that plays out in the book moving forward, because if I had to imagine how it would play out in real life, is that like you've just traumatized the earth. You've just traumatized 7 billion people. Not everybody's coming out of that normal,
No, and not everybody's going to respond to it in the way that you want. That's one of the most intriguing parts of the issues, maybe, and the part that I wish it focused on a little more,
Mm.
because, again, a lot of this feels like a contrivance to, I said it, I stupidly said it last issue or last episode, that Al's transformation back to human seemed like maybe more permanent this time, because I thought that I know we're transitioning away from Al, and so I thought, oh, this will be how it happens. Because again, I don't usually read ahead. In this case, it doesn't take long for that to just be turned around and flipped on its head, because as Al is marching up to Wanda's front door with the intent of walking in, telling Wanda he's back from the dead and he's a human man again, and that he wants to adopt Cyan, and he wants Wanda to divorce Terry, and he knows in his heart she'll come back to him because they were true loves.
Right. It's a drum that he's beat before. It's kind of
Well,
like
it's his whole reason for coming back in the first place.
and we've talked a little bit about David Hine feeling a little bit like a mercenary in terms of like hey, here's all the stuff. We gotta maybe wrap some of it up or finally pay it off. Or, I think one of the things that Holguin was really good at is the sort of infinite comics. Like we're just gonna keep this character on this like treadmill forever and keep him kind of cycling through the same few um, uh,
Yeah.
villains and scenarios, and we're gonna have the illusion of change, very like Stan Lee type of thing.
Right.
But I think that the difference between like Spawn and something like a Marvel or DC book, or even some of the other Image books, is that like they, without a strong supporting cast, it's really tough to keep a character on that treadmill because you're so hyper focused on one character that the I think readers, and I think we on some level as spawnographers, as historians of this title, we have kind of gotten frustrated with like it feeling like the creators don't have an end game in a way, and they've not been great. And this goes for Todd, this goes for Holguin, this goes for Hein to this point. um, they've not been great at giving us like small wins and giving us like these moments that feel like catharsis. I think we go back to X-Men a lot, but I think it's really one of the most relevant books to Spawn in a way, because because Claremont's run is so long, is that like you definitely he had the benefit of being able to like kind of switch off focus characters.
Well, you get
um
to see the long game play out in a really specific
yeah, well,
and formative way for the industry.
right, absolutely, but also that we get to Storm is a really great example of this early in Claremont's run. Storm is such a focal point for the series. Really, it may not seem
She's
like it.
almost the audience POV character in a way because she's the youngest member of the team at
uh
that point.
yeah, and but then as we get into the Outback era, it's not really her story anymore, and her impact on the book kind of shifts. Right, we're post life death, we're post so many different things that Claremont's able to just like move the camera off to the side a little bit and be like, all right, we're going to check in on this stuff now. We're going to tell these
Right.
character stories. And Spawn doesn't have the ability to do that. We did it by being able to go read Hellspawn, or, you know, um, read a little bit of Sam and Twitch, or, whatever kind of side thing that we want to do. And yes, readers can go pick up a whole other book to sort of get that experience. But in the main title, I mean, there's a reason his name's on the cover, right? We're talking about Spawn. And it's funny that I'm saying this, and in our second issue, we're going to be talking about a completely different character that has nothing to do with
Still
this.
Spawn.
It is technically still a Spawn.
Well, the other thing about Spawn in that regard is that the stakes are as big as it gets. You have to. The Armageddon has happened.
Yeah.
The world has literally ended. How often does that happen in like a comic book? The big example is Thanos and the Infinity Saga, especially in the MCU, where like Endgame was this huge culmination, and they lost. They lost in Infinity War, and you had to see them pull off a miracle. It's that same level of like what happens when the thing that you feared, that you've tried to prevent for like however long, a decade now, 15 years of comics at this point, when it finally comes to pass. And there's also an aftershock of that where it's like it's a hard act to follow and to make people give a shit. I
Well,
think the thing,
and this is the second time we're in this, right? The first time was killing Malbolgia. And
right.
we did that, and we were like, oh fuck. That's so huge for Al. Like, what's gonna be next? And we went through a little bit of growing pains right after that. We were like, okay, we're not really entirely sure where the book is going. They kind of Holguin and McFarlane kind of weren't. It's very clear from their writing that they weren't sure where the book was going to go, in the sense that like they go from Al being so self-assured and so like, I'm going to protect Earth, and they're like, we don't really know what to do with that, because his villains are mostly like mafia bosses.
Well, and he's
And
also just not, he's never been the traditional superhero that way.
exactly. He doesn't have a Spawn phone where that rings and tells him that, you know, Redeemers poison the water supply. Spawn, you gotta get him.
He'll have short runs where he's doing these little episodic things, but it's more like the Spectre where he shows up as an agent of punishment. Rarely is he fighting a supervillain unless one's sent against him.
Yeah. Well, and also too, I think that I think on some level the writers are aware of this limitation, right? We've done the sort of throwbacky, like, what if Spawn was a traditional superhero, even in the art style, right?
Right.
And I do think that there's an understanding that like this character can't be like those characters because there's something kind of inherently broken about him. And this is what I think is actually interesting about this issue. I don't really love this issue. I get how we got here. It is the sort of epilogue of Armageddon, and it is the like, okay, well, now that everything's happened, where does that leave us? And I had even previously said in the last few uh, episodes about how I was like disappointed to not see Spawn supporting cast, Terry and Wanda and whatever. And then we got maybe way too much of his supporting cast in a way that I don't think served Wanda very well. I think Wanda continues to be underserved by
Oh,
David
especially
Hine.
in this issue.
Yeah, and I actually think that by just proximity, Terry is also has kind of just become a little bit one note here. You know, as Al is approaching this house where he's going to kind of finally kind of confront Wanda with his humanity, you know, Mother of Machines says, "You have to stop. Like, I have to show you
Mother of
something."
Miracles.
What did I say?
Mother of Machines.
Mother of Miracles, excuse me. Mother of Machines? Oh, that's Elish Norn from Magic
Oh.
the Gathering, is Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. So every time I think of Mother of Miracles, I keep thinking, doesn't matter. Anyway, she says to him, hey, like, before you go in there, there's something you have to know. I have to show you. And she kind of turns Al into a ghost so he can go
She
into the
straight up
house.
Columbos him. One more thing.
One more thing. And, you know, inside, Granny and Terry and Cyan and Wanda are all kind of like reeling still from this experience that, like you said, everybody knows it happened and they're all taking it in different ways.
There's one
And
caveat to that, which is the Mother of Miracles did make everyone in Terry and Wanda's lives forget that the twins who were God and the devil were their children.
right.
So they
And
don't remember that part. They remember the twins, but they don't remember that the twins are Terry and Wanda's children.
correct,
And
which
yeah,
thank God.
Mother of
Honestly.
Miracles makes Al all like a Christmas carol and takes him inside to see this. And yeah, Granny Blake is kind of unpacking, you know, this is one of the most compelling parts of this issue to me is Granny Blake dealing with the trauma of getting to heaven and it not being paradise at all and experiencing God and the devil as warring children.
There's
And she's saying,
something
I know, sorry, go ahead.
no, but I don't mean to cut you off, but there is something
No, it's okay.
so unfortunate though about her approach to this, which is that like she basically says like that wasn't it. That wasn't the thing I thought it was. And we run into that, like, not to bring it back to like our current day political climate, but that's sort of like the Epstein files are a great example of this, right? You're being shown, hey, here's the thing. And you just have a bunch of people going like, that's not it. That's not real. It's not real. That's not what it is. That's not the thing that I think it is. And it is, I really like this characterization for Granny Blake. I like her sort of like belief. However, as a religiously traumatized adult, I am so frustrated by this because it is the
Well,
same rhetoric that I have to fight with my parents about sometimes.
there is another side to that coin in
Mm.
this case, because again, the reality is different than the fantasy here, where they have seen the material effect of God and the devil, so they have a reason to believe in these figures. Granny Blake, in particular, died in heaven as like one of the Redeemer warriors, and she mentions Redeemer here. Uh, she says the word Redeemer. But more than anyone else, she has seen what is beyond the beyond.
True.
And as Mother of Miracles hinted, there is something past the concepts of life and death and souls. There is something else that the people who die in heaven and hell will experience, something beyond oblivion, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think there's some of that in Granny Blake. Like, no, I have faith that that was not what I was promised. And I mean, that is not what she was promised,
True.
but she's choosing to believe rather than a broken promise that it's still a promise unfulfilled.
Yeah.
That is reflective of some people who turn deeper and deeper into their faith in the face of people who want to tell them that it's the opposite of everything they ever thought it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the crisis of faith that's happening globally for
True.
Christianity.
You know,
So
and the one who keeps catching strays through all this though is Terry, because Granny Blake is talking about how it was Al that saved them, that she saw Al and he's an angel, and he's a real angel. She got her eyesight back. She saw that, and even Cyan says, "Hey, the sad man kept us safe while everyone else was dying, but." Actually, I'm not going to call him the sad man anymore. His name's Al, so that's what I'll call him. I have to hand it to Philip Tan here. There's a lot of really subtle acting from Terry across these panels. It
there
feels
is.
like he's
He's kind of
wincing.
like giving side eye a little bit at like, because they're talking about Al. Yeah. The one thing I will say, the one thing Granny says is, I think that this is all a test of our faith, and I'm not shaken, Wanda. I know that my Redeemer lives, which I think is an interesting line. Again, given that she was essentially one of the what do they call raptured, which were in visual representation seem to be redeemers, the same way the army of hell were hellspawn. So yeah, Terry and Wanda leave Cyan in her room and they go to sleep in like the room that would have been the twins' room. And instead of being the twins' room, it's an unused room with two beds in it in case they have children. And they talk about how they wanted more children, and Wanda kind of calls Terry out and says, kids don't happen by magic, which is kind of ironic given how the twins actually happened.
Yeah.
Implying that they're not being intimate. And they go deeper into detail about that. They are arguing. Terry finally outs with it and says, yeah, look, what's bothering me is that you still love Al and you love him more than me. I'm just what you get as a consolation prize, basically.
Yeah.
And
I have to say, I don't, we're going to get into the parts of this that I don't love, but I have kind of missed the soap opera dramatics of Spawn. And this scene starts out.
It's functional here.
Here
we're addressing something that is cathartic for Wanda and Terry in a way that is very expected, and you really want Wanda to do what she does for the first part of this, which is entreat Terry, saying like, well, of course I love him, he died. Part of someone, when someone dies, a part of them stays with you. I don't stop loving his memory. And Terry's like, yeah, but he did come back to life is the problem. And also, you have all this stuff from your marriage with him. It's not like you just pull it out on like your wedding anniversary, or he says some snide remarks at her.
I think he's being snide, but at the same time, I do think that he's being honest, and these two characters are frequently not honest with each other. And I think that he is being honest in the sense that if she did bring it out on their wedding anniversary, like the day he died, that she always like went to his grave or
he would
something.
see it as a tradition more than the living presence of Al's memory, which is literally often in their lives. His frustration is absolutely founded. It's absolutely, it is so easy to give Terry grace here, and Wanda, because we know that she does love Terry, to give them both grace in this. And there's a point where Wanda says, "You've been spying on me," to Terry when he confronts her with the stuff about Al's pictures. And it calls back to the fact that Terry is a spy.
Yeah.
So he's looking for stuff maybe as a function of his character, and he's seeing it. And unfortunately, here's where we're going to get into the the content warning for spousal abuse and violence against women, and again, we'll say pregnancy trauma. We will try not to dwell on it for the details for too
Yeah.
long, though we do have to explain.
You can already tell we're not going as panel by panel as we typically do.
No,
And
and
that's
the art
partly
in this is great. Continually, the acting from Terry and
Yeah.
from Wanda, it's really good.
Yeah, that's what I want to give the art team their flowers here, because I do think that this is some of the hardest stuff to do in superhero comics specifically, because you don't get asked to do this kind of thing that often. And this is a long scene of
It is.
a lot of emotions, with that is asking, how do you make a man throwing a box of photos dramatic? And
Oh, and it works so well.
looks great.
I
Looks
mean,
great.
the craft of it is excellent. Up to here, I'm fully engrossed. Up
Yeah.
to this point, I'm like, this is really one of the last unsaid things of the original era of this comic that matters, is what about Terry and Wanda?
Yeah.
And also Cyan and Granny and the rest of Al's loved ones, really. And I'm so on board for this, and I would be on board for them to split up. I would be on board for them to reconcile, to have this moment of catharsis, whatever it takes. And one of my least favorite things in fiction is just watching married couples fight and argue. I honestly, I think it's like not entertainment. But here, it serves the story very well, and it's something that's a long time coming. It's also not what this book usually is.
Right.
It's something that it needs to be right now. I will agree with that.
Yeah.
However, what happens next is kind of it is a strange contrivance that is really kind of character assassination combined with honestly fridging in a way, and so many other kind of just bad tropes that doesn't serve any of the characters. It barely seems to serve the plot.
Yeah.
And
So Wanda, as Terry's getting angry with her, and she says, "So what's next? Are you going to hit me?" And he is stunned by this, and he says, "Hit you? I would never." And she says, with Al in the background, and we have to remind everybody, Al is here.
Al is
He's
watching as a
seeing
Force
this
Ghost.
entire thing. He's just he's a Force Ghost, just kind of hanging out. Actually, I think he's used really, really well in terms of like where he
absolutely.
exists in the panels.
He's kind of a great like emotional foil to this.
Yeah.
It makes us feel less voyeuristic in a way.
Yes, because it feels like we're watching him watching them instead of us watching them. Which
yes.
Is
It's a strange separation, but it's kind of one of those story layers that when you're reading it, it has an effect.
Yeah. And
because it makes again a visual element.
Yeah, and she says, she comes back with Al would have, and he's like, "What?" And
even Al in the background looks shocked.
And so she goes into a whole story about Al's abuse.
Yeah, she discloses to Terry, yes, a bunch of spousal abuse from Al. We're gonna skip over some of it. She goes through a lot of the tropes of like, I thought I was stronger than being abused and staying with someone who abused me, but I rationalized it in my head.
And he would always come back and be so sweet after, and he was so romantic, and he always knew when to say the right things.
Not a cliche, but it is the pattern that many people have now become aware of how these kind of abusive dynamics often work. The abuse culminates in Wanda getting pregnant.
Well, we have to back up slightly here. There's an important thing that she says. She says he knew the day he had a kid, he'd have to take a desk job. He knew I wouldn't let him change a diaper with the same hands that had been around someone's throat.
Right.
And
He's a world famous government assassin. And the thing is, it ties a knot directly between Al's trauma and what he's doing, which is abusing Wanda. And okay, here's the thing. Like you said, it's not like we can't tell these stories.
Yeah.
Somewhere, someone, somehow. And it's not like there's anything in here that is a particularly offensive depiction of what abusive dynamics look like. But what it is it is taking away Al's heroism that he just sacrificed so much potential power in order to try and escape corruption. And here it turns out that he is still deeply corrupt. I think there are ways we could have had the sort of like Twilight Zone twist without it being character assassination for Al, deep trauma for Terry, that everything he thought he knew about basically his whole life, his not even just his best
Not
friend,
just his wife as
but
well.
his wife, in a way that makes him obviously sympathetic for his wife and disgusted with his former best friend. It also it makes Wanda into more of an object than anything else so far. If this is such a perfect moment for her to put the nail in the coffin and to say to Terry, look, I loved Al, but he's dead. And no matter how many times he tells me he clawed his way back from hell, I will never let him claw his way back to me.
Yeah.
That is not what I want. It is to give her the agency of saying, no, Terry, I love our life. I love our child. I don't love my dead husband more than you. They don't need to have her to give Al an abusive background that really victimizes Wanda in a story way that I think is kind of sad, given that she's gotten more sort of agency and escalation, at least compared to some of the other human characters in this story. And now it's kind of just being ripped away, which is what abuse does. But it did need to be in this comic. And it's also, frankly, goes on a long time. It's hard to read. Wanda discloses to Terry also that because she stopped taking her birth control, she did get pregnant in the hopes of luring Al away.
Now,
from his
Al's
job.
in the middle of this as a ghost saying that it's a lie. We couldn't have kids. We tried. This is all lies. And I
Yes.
do think that this is, and we talked about this before, how the sort of abuse angle, because this is not the first time that we've heard of Al hitting Wanda. It has
No,
been introduced in the past.
it has. And so,
But this
it
is
just
the difference between, I'm so sorry. This is the difference between Todd and even Todd and Brian Holguin working in concert and their handling of this aspect, where it was much clearer to us that this was some sort of figment.
well, it wasn't necessarily clear at the start, but there was a caveat that sort of came in
True.
later.
There's one
that
here also, but we'll get
sort
there.
of.
We'll get there.
So Al finds out Wanda is pregnant, and he refuses to quit because My Chemical Romance has just formed. In the timeline of Spawn, which is apparently shifted from him dying in 1985 to dying in 2001, we get this rendering in totally appropriate black and red Black Parade colors of what it looked like the day that My Chemical Romance was formed. And Al is telling Wanda he's kind of freaking out about it, as many people did. It was a huge moment for culture. Al is looking at her and he's got this skull. It's a close up on Wanda's eye, and instead of the reflection of Al, it's the reflection of a skull in her pupil. And Al is saying they want to throw acid in the face of every American child and watch the flesh slide off the bones. My Chemical Romance wants to turn all the children goth.
Yeah.
But no, this is actually incredibly reflective of the jingoistic, nightmarishly, like violently, quote unquote, patriotic, reaction to the day that My Chemical Romance was inspired. I don't know any other way to describe that.
Even the sliding timeline doesn't feel like it works for me unless, like, such a clear 9/11 reference, and Al would have been long dead by the time. Well, Al would have been long spawned by the time 9/11
Right.
happened.
And I mean, the problem really is that they dated a lot of the previous
Yeah.
stuff, which Marvel often doesn't do. You can kind of track it, or DC, but it doesn't matter. We
The
can put
problem
on
is
our
also
comic book goggles and squint, or
the problem is also well, no, our job is to make sense of all this. And the other problem is
there's
Cyan, because she's 10 now. So time has definitely passed.
yeah, it's well, and so we've talked a little bit about how there were some caveats before. There's a caveat here, which is that this doesn't really line up timeline wise.
Hmm.
It just doesn't. And so that could indicate, if we really want to squint, and I don't know what's coming down the pike with this, if we really want to squint at it right now, we can say, well, again, this isn't quite real. And there's a potential no prize answer to that we'll get to. But Wanda and Terry are fighting. Wanda and Terry are fighting, but Wanda is relaying the story of her fight with Al when she told him she was pregnant. And here's where things get really heavy, which is that Al abuses her in a way that causes a miscarriage.
In one of the most insane double page spreads I think I've actually seen in my entire life.
Yes, and it's intended to have strong impact, and it does, but I don't think it's positive. Again, the rendering is not the issue. What it's rendering is the issue. And again, it's just an incredibly profoundly abusive moment that leads to extreme harm and sorrow to Wanda, and that's really the biggest impact of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good to read. It makes Al completely unsympathetic, which is something that he's never been before as Spawn.
Yeah, it does really, he keeps shouting that this isn't true. That he keeps shouting no at her entire story, as she kind of like says, "I lost him long before he died. I was waiting for him to come back from the last mission to tell him I was leaving him, and he never came back." And we're like, as a reader, you're kind of like, "This is fucking news to me." Uh,
Yeah, and
it
she
it, it
tells Al, or sorry, she tells Terry, "Don't you ever do what Al did? Don't you leave me?" Which again, I think that speaks to the fact that she knows by Terry's reaction that she can trust him, as she always has, not to abuse her, especially not physically. And also, that's what she could have said without the whole abuse subplot.
yeah,
She could say, ultimately, Al chose to go on that mission and, take that risk knowing he might never come back to me. I made peace with that, but I guess he didn't. You know what I mean? Like, that's because that's really what happened. Wanda ultimately made peace with the fact that Al wasn't coming back.
right,
Al couldn't. And so what happens next is the Mother of Miracles sort of pulls Al's soul back to his body, like his astral form, Doctor Strange style, and says to him, "Now do you see why you could never go back to her?" And Al is furious. He says, "You knew this. You knew." And Mother of Miracles says, "You knew too, Al. You suppressed the memory. You tried to keep it buried, but you've always known. Every time you tried to go back to her as Al Simmons, your body rebelled. Why do you think that was?" And Al laments the abuse he did with his own two hands. And as he's staring at his hand, it turns back into Spawn's hand. It starts to corpse up with worms
yeah.
crawling through it. And it's what Mother of Miracles says, that was your subconscious. You could never let her see you as Al Simmons, only as the evil thing you believed you had become. And
That is kind of okay. So the crux of my no prize here is kind of that
I
line,
think I know where you're going.
which is that this isn't real, that this didn't happen. But when Al remade the world because of his subconscious guilt about even just leaving Wanda in the first place, that like this is like a creation to drive her away from him, because he knows in his subconscious that she deserves better, that
Maybe.
she is better
I
off
think
with
that
Terry.
I don't think that doesn't make sense. I think that's very possible. The alternate no prize explanation that I have is none of that was real. That whole conversation was the mother of miracles manipulating Al and actually seeding his mind with these ideas. There's not there's not nothing on the page to suggest that could be the case.
Yeah.
Because what happens next is the mother of miracles tells Al that his penance is that he has to stay on Earth as Spawn until he basically earns redemption.
It's a very like 100 Good Deeds of Eddie McDowd. You ever watch that show? It was like a
No.
Nickelodeon show about a kid who dies and he comes back to life as a dog, and
Great.
and he gets told like, listen, you can become a human again. You just have to. You are just a shitty person, so you've got to like become. You got to do good deeds as a dog, and then.
So he is taking a step backwards on karma's wheel,
right?
And then karmic cycle.
But then you'll be returned to humanity once you do 100 good things.
So he's like, it's like the Suicide Squad for dead kids.
Yeah, basically, and and it didn't air 100.
Who would be in that? JonBenet Ramsey. Oh boy. So yeah, Al turns back into Spawn and Mother of Miracles. He's like, please look, if I can't just be home with Wanda, just let me die then.
Right.
Like, that's why I don't know that it was necessarily, it could be a combination of all those things. It could be the Mother of Miracles having seeded that in there. We just don't know. At this point, we may never really know. I don't like it though, so I'm going to try and headcanon some way to maybe not have Al be that person, because again, it makes the character so unsympathetic.
The reality though too, the reality is a bad way to put this, I guess, but we also do know that Mammon has fucked with Al, and we still, and Mammon is also Mammon is still fucking out there, so there's nothing to indicate that this isn't further manipulation, as you're saying. I do think that as like a reader, it is frustrating because we keep having information withheld from us that it makes the explanation not all that satisfying, because we're not cutting back to like Mammon being like, hooray, like what is the bigger end game for fucking Al at this point than the last thing that happened, which was Armageddon? Like, I think that's what's frustrating. We don't know the motivations of anybody who would want to manipulate Al. What's the point? What's the bigger thing? We just saw the biggest thing.
Right. And so there are a lot of things that I thought might happen here. Okay. I thought that what was going to happen, what does happen, is that the Mother of Miracles is like, you can't die. You have to do your penance on Earth, silly Billy. Now let's take you home, and sends him back where? But the alleys of Rat City. And Al is just, he hates this. And again, this feels like manipulation by the Mother of Miracles, wanting to put Al in a specific place, wanting him to do a specific thing to get to a specific point. I thought when I first saw it before he went back to the alley, I thought he was going to go to hell. Also, you could have had this happen again without Al having that kind of rug pulled. It would almost be more effective if Al was like, this is it, I'm going to go finally get Wanda. And then he just walked in front of a bus. You know what I'm saying? And then he's suddenly dead again. It's like, you asked for mortality and you got it. You got the monkey's paw version. I thought that's what was going to happen, and then there'd be some secondary cycle
funny
to it.
For Spawn, though?
I don't think it's funny. I mean, maybe, but like
that is how like the Coen brothers would write Spawn.
Even if it's not that, you give him his mortality and then you pay it up. Like, make that the Twilight Zone, like Al lost everything. And then maybe he wakes up back in Rat City again as Spawn. And turns out he's been reset by Armageddon after all. You know what I mean? There's a million ways that we could have gotten to this point without having to go through the shit that we just went through for it. Yeah. And again, I can't stress enough that we skipped over a lot of shit.
We did and we didn't. I think that we
We
breeze
skipped over a
through.
lot of details.
Which I think that we explained what happens, and I think that that's enough.
Oh,
I want to shout
absolutely.
out these last 2 pages though. I think they fucking rule. I think they're just awesome. You good?
Yes.
Um,
Sorry.
I love that. Yes, this is like the kind of classic superhero reset of like you save the world, now everything is still the same, and we didn't really get anywhere. But I think there's just some really good storytelling by the art team here. I think also,
Absolutely.
and I really like David Hines' work here. The alleys are deserted. Even the homeless have better places to be. They don't need them anymore. There's no more God, no Satan, no more demons or monsters or fallen angels to protect them from. No one needs him. He is Al Simmons, the man who saved the world, but could not save himself. And I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. That's Spawn, you know. Unfortunately, those are not the last 2 pages of the book. They are the last 2 pages of the
No.
story.
Well, first off, I do want to say a couple things here. Um, this splash page of Al sitting on the throne as Spawn. First
Sick.
off, this is like very peak Spawn,
Mm-hmm.
and it rules hard. Like this is a Spawn poster you could have on your wall and be like, yes, this is fucking sick. In fact, I would absolutely have this Spawn poster. You know what I mean? I love it. It says he is Al Simmons, the man who could save the world but not himself. And I love that. I also want to point out that the alley that he's in, there's a sign that says Chikatilo Imports. Do you know who Andre Chikatilo is? Well, basically the most notorious serial killer in Russian history, the Ripper of Rostov, and a million other names. Um, Brutally murdered men, women, and children in terrifying and awful ways, and then made a huge spectacle of his trial. And when was his trial? Would have been like in the late 90s, I think, or late 80s. Yeah, he was tried in 92 and convicted and sentenced to death.
I like that. I like that when like sometimes we are a true crime adjacent podcast.
Oh, I could go on about Andre Chikatilo, but I don't think our readers want me to. Listeners. I always say readers because we're reading. I like to think they're reading along with us. Our listeners, I don't think they want that. There are plenty of resources for them to go to. We get an epilogue, and I actually don't hate this epilogue. I get it. We talked about it slightly off mic that the meaning feels a little obscure, but I think it has one. We see this guy in his apartment watching the news, and he is just like chowing down on snacks. He's got all these weird ventriloquist dummies that look like magicians around, and he's yelling at someone. Lenny is who he's yelling at, saying the
Which like
apartment's a shithole.
is this also like an of mice or
Of Mice and
of
Men,
mice and
George
men
and Lenny.
like
Maybe.
reference?
I don't know. I don't know what this guy's name is. But he's watching the news as well. And the news is just, it says, so I guess tonight's headline has to be this: My friends, it's been a beautiful day. And what we see is that this guy who came home and was yelling at his roommate has picked up one of these ventriloquist dummy looking things, statues, whatever, and taken it into the other room and presumably beaten the shit out of his roommate because now he's sitting in front of the TV eating snacks with the ventriloquist dummy next to him or statue or whatever the hell it is.
I think it's just really far in the foreground.
Yeah, no, it's small sized. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the same thing. It's like the size of his hand, but I just can't figure out. It looks like a ventriloquist dummy. It's weird. It kind of has
It's
his
like the
face.
Nutcracker or
It's like
something.
a tchotchke of some kind. Whatever it is. He is apparently beating his roommate to death with it, and it and the guy are all covered in blood.
Yep. And we
The
don't know what to do with
implication
that.
here, the implication here being all the things that they hope are gone from Earth are happening all around them still.
Yeah, there's a couple ways to take this. Like I said, there's the mice and men thing. If that's Lenny, I guess he's George, right? The other way to take it is that this is Cain and Abel.
Be the other way. Lenny is the one who
Oh yeah, you're
told
right.
George to think
That
of the
doesn't really
rabbit.
make sense. So it's probably not that. I think it's just a weird coincidental name. It is kind of a Cain and Abel thing. It is sort of the first sin that we're seeing in this, in what we're being told is kind of like a world without it. I don't really know what to make of it past that. It
Yeah.
does. The last time that we saw Cain, he was in hell because he's Cagliostro.
Right. And
So, yeah.
there's a lot to unpack from that potentially.
And you know
So-
what? We just talked way more about that issue than I thought we were gonna. I'm proud of
We
us.
did. We kind of skipped the main shitty part a lot. I mean, didn't skip it, but there were a lot of things that we didn't dig into in there.
I think that we did the
I
best
think we did
could.
we did the best we could.
I think we did as much as the book deserves.
Yeah. So on that note, Pierce, you know what to do. Hit me with those credits for 165.
All right. Spawn number 165. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics present Mandarin Spawn. Story by David Hine. Pencils by Lan Medina. Inks by Edgar Tadeo. Lettering by Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Andy Troy, Matt Mila, and Brian Haberlin. Production by Jay Photos, Francis Takanaga. Cover by Greg Capullo. I mean, the cover's the toy, which I've got sitting next to me right here on our Not Video podcast. It's a cool toy. I think Mandarin Spawn looks fucking cool. And there's a little note to the reader here that I'm going to read. It says, this tale fits outside our normal series continuity, but we figure everyone could use a breather from the drama of our last few issues. So please view this as it is intended, as a view into the life of another Spawn from another place and time. Next month, Al will be with us again, our hero who could save the world, but not himself.
This is kind of an inventory story, as they used to call it, in a way, where back in the old days of comics, when you didn't miss a month, there weren't delays, unless like all the paper caught on fire or some shit. They would have what were called inventory tales, which were stories that were one and dones that they could just fit in anywhere. So like if the main writer or artist was going to be late on the book, wasn't going to ship in time, they'd take one of those inventories off the shelf, and the Incredible Hulk would just have this random adventure, and then they'd get back to whatever was next. It's often usually different creators, maybe a different artist at least.
Yeah, this one is dedicated to Greg Capullo.
Well, wow. Who's that?
No idea. Doesn't seem that important.
Yeah.
And so Mandarin Spawn is a toy, I believe, had already been out, right?
I think so. Let's find out. I know that Samurai Spawn and Manga Spawn had.
Yeah, the first Mandarin Spawn was released in Spawn Series 14 in 1999. That was the Dark Ages series.
Yeah, I had that Dark Ages Spawn figure. Yeah, there we go.
So it had already been out there for a while. This is one of those things. It also, in addition to feeling a little bit like an inventory story, feels a little bit like a backdoor pilot, right? Oh, are people going to like this quite enough that we can?
Sure. I mean, we've also seen a few other of those kind of those spawns kind of come up throughout this. They've used a lot of aesthetics from the toy line. I mean, even there was the one issue where Spawn was fighting with a double-ended scythe, and he looked like battle-clad Spawn, that figure. They've drawn a lot of those aesthetics. And here's maybe the most direct one. So this story, again, good Lord, I just need to give, I'll say, a content warning for extreme violence, torture, and abuse of disabled people. It's tough. We open the story with a tale of a Mandarin, a government bureaucrat leading a sort of minor fiefdom in China. Mandarin, of course, meaning like a government bureaucrat, named Zhang Li, who kind of rules this area with an iron fist, sort of a sheriff of Nottingham, Prince John kind of figure, where he's extracting taxes from the people around him like blood from a stone. So one of his tax collectors shows up, The art in this, by the way, is really nice. It's great art. It looks really good. It's boy, some of what it depicts is really tough.
It is
One of his
extremely clear. It is extremely readable. Like in terms of there's nothing is confusing about this book in terms of the art. And I want to shout out the art team as well for just doing a good job with a probably kind of tough script, in
I
terms
bet
of
that they
its.
had a blast with some of this. I'm going to go ahead and say, despite what's depicted in some of this, I bet the artist Lan Medina had a fucking great time
Yeah, especially towards the end, and we'll
because
get there.
so the Zheng Li is being told by one of his tax collectors that one of his provinces couldn't produce enough gold or food. And Zheng Li is like, well, then maybe we should just slaughter them so that they don't have to feed as many people. This is all very, you pointed it out. This is all sort of very mythologizing, like the West mythologizing China and ancient Chinese culture. We've seen a little bit of that from David Hein throughout this. And I should point out, David Hein is English. So
Yeah.
his view on like the reaction of Americans to the formation of My Chemical Romance on that fateful day in September 2001 is very much an outsider's frank view. And so I don't even blame that part. I just, yeah. But that said, it also makes this very exoticizing, especially because the tax collector says, no, they gave us something. They gave us this beast who is the spawn of a human and a demon. And they unveil this cage. And when they open it, what is inside but a profoundly disabled human being?
What is the condition that Joseph Merrick has? Because it's if you've seen the animal man, the elephant man, the
Yes,
David
this is
Lynch film.
straight up the drawing of this person is the Elephant Man.
Yeah.
This is and not even just the film, the real Elephant Man, of whom there are photographs.
Mhm.
This is the Elephant Man specifically.
He's a little bit
Like
bigger, I'd say. But
maybe yes, the hulking version of that, but like if you look at the shape of his body and everything and like which parts are exaggerated and how,
yeah,
it's deeply unkind. Please, God, leave Joseph Merrick alone. No, I will say I love the David Lynch movie. Maybe my
me too.
favorite David Lynch movie. It is deeply tragic.
It's
It is
weirdly his
just,
like most normal movie.
well, I believe it was maybe his first like studio film.
First studio film. It's his second film. I mean, it's right after Eraserhead.
Yeah. But it is just so moving in a such an ethereally human way. I just this is just like Vertigo comics, like exploitation of real concepts. And I don't know, knowing what I know, that the Elephant Man was a human being who suffered greatly, both because of his physical condition and because of how that made others perceive him.
Yeah.
What comes next is horrifying. Zhang Li is like, oh great, I love it. The guy who brought him is like, says the monster can't speak. The villagers say it's immune to injury and pain. And Zhang Li is immediately like, oh, is it? And stabs him.
Yeah, and even his like main or his daughter is like, "Ooh, let me try," and she sticks a hairpin through his cheeks, and everybody is kind of reveling, except for the storyteller, the court storyteller who is kind of telling
Right.
this story. Even he
And
seems kind of saddened by this abuse of this man,
and that is all that happens next
yeah,
is the emperor makes a game of people trying to do harm to this poor man who, again, treating what was a real condition, which you asked what it was, we don't actually know
it
exactly.
doesn't have a name, right? It
Well,
just
no,
like,
there are potential names. The reason we don't know,
I know they thought it was many things like Proteus syndrome
yes,
or
so okay, the two big potentials are
acrocephaly. Yeah.
acrocephaly, or Proteus syndrome. The reason we don't know is because the way to identify those things hadn't been learned yet.
Hmm.
And while we can test for DNA, unfortunately, Joseph Merrick's skeleton has also become an object of curiosity famously owned at one point by Michael Jackson. It is a medical display item that has become a piece of just
So deep,
the
so deeply
remains of a
troubling.
human being who deserves dignity that have been reduced to a freakish display, the same as he was reduced to in life in order to try and survive. And because of that, and because of the display, his bones have been bleached so much that they can't actually extract DNA from them. So we'll never know exactly what it was. All of those conditions cause different types of unregulated growth in the body. Sometimes, usually in quite severe ways, that escalate over time. Something that Joseph Merrick did experience. They kind of explain this poor man's origin. We learn later that his name is it is what is it?
His name is Cheng Li.
Cheng Lei. Yes, Cheng Lei.
Yeah.
And so, or Cheng Lai, honestly, I'm sorry, I don't know the correct pronunciation exactly. So the storyteller comforts him every time that they abuse him. He brings him like ointments for his wounds so they'll heal.
Yeah.
And even though the creature doesn't outwardly show signs of feeling pain,
It's clear
abuse
that
is abuse and trauma is trauma. And the power of abuse is the psychological torture of it.
yeah.
Knowing that your body is reduced to an object. And as we learn, this is a human being here who does have understanding. He's just afflicted with a more mythologized version of a physical condition that real people have had and experienced. And
And
he
even the daughter
notices,
kind of comes back to
well, importantly, the storyteller notices as he's putting the healing like liniments on him that he has one spot on his chest that seems to have like regular human baby soft skin. Then yes, the daughter comes out,
just to taunt him, and she comes out in a robe.
yeah, taunts him with her body and tells him he'll never know the touch of a woman, just trying to just sexually abusing him now.
Yeah.
Look, the art here is great in the sense that it's perfectly well rendered. I have literally no complaints about the art in
No,
these two
me neither.
issues. I think they're actually some of the
Looks
best
great.
looking issues we've had consistently on the train of great looking issues. Unfortunately, this is legitimately deeply troubling to me.
Yeah.
I have what could be classified as invisible disabilities, or at least, conditions that affect my quality of life. And that makes me extremely sympathetic to human beings that have very visible disabilities. Also grew up working with disabled people and going to volunteering at many, many sporting events for disabled athletes. And so there's just an inner respect I have that feels deeply hurt by this story. And I know that it is the Elephant Man is a trope. He's a character in so many things. He has the unfortunate history of having existed in London, in Whitechapel, around the same time as Jack the Ripper. And so, like, he often gets lumped into stuff like in a sort of Wald Newton, everything is fictional, everything is connected way with like Jack the Ripper and these sort of things. And I get where this is coming from. It's not like they were like, oh man, it would be sick to mock a real disability. But like, this is a profound and extreme condition that people have. And there are people alive today that have conditions similar and related to this.
I would say the big one is Adam Pearson. Is probably
Yes,
the
I was
most
going to
notable one.
say
If
Adam
anybody
Pearson
has
right
seen,
now.
if anybody has seen A Different Man, which if you haven't, I mean, I recommend it. It's a solid flick. It'll remind
He's a
you
very
that,
funny and charming guy who just has a
he really
very
is.
serious facial difference.
Yeah,
And
he has neurofibromatosis.
which I
He's
believe
also
is,
in Under the Skin.
oh yeah, he sure is.
You got to be in the right mood for that movie.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's his debut.
But yes, so I just, with again the small seed of grace towards the creators that like, I'm not trying to cancel anybody for a 20-year-old comic. that
No.
was made at a time when humanity in general had less understanding of empathy, maybe if more experience of it on some level. There wasn't as much of a rejection of it as much as an ignorance to many aspects of it.
I think it's okay to tell this story the way it's told. I think it is meant to be deeply troubling. I think that you are meant to empathize with this.
I would have less problems with it if two factors.
Okay.
If this wasn't specifically a drawing of Joseph Merrick, and
I
I know
mean,
that
it's
that's the
not
intent,
technically.
but it is.
I hear
But
you.
it is. Only one human being has looked like this. And
hear
if
ya.
you look at the pictures of him, it's the same. It is exaggerated on some level, but it is the same specific differences in
ya.
his body, his arm, his face, the shape of his face. It's specifically portraying that. And it's meant to say to the reader, this is a man, not a demon.
Yeah, that's true.
I get that, but I don't love seeing it. It
Sure.
doesn't pass the bar as like particular entertainment to me. Also because I just don't like seeing torture. I don't find that to be entertainment either.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think though that, and we'll get to it shortly, the sort of way that the story plays out, I think, does
Oh,
not
and the other thing is
absolve.
exoticizing. But
Yeah, but it
no, it
doesn't
doesn't
it
necessarily
doesn't
absolve
absolve
that.
it. But I think it is like, I get how you write this. I get how you write
Oh
this.
no, I get it. I get it. And again, there are ways that I think it could have been told that would have satisfied me more,
Fair.
or at least that would have passed muster for me in a stronger way. Anyway, the the bureaucrats, the corrupt leaders, blindfolded Archer takes a shot at the creature who is already full of arrows. The creature, the poor guy, Cheng Lei, who's already full of arrows. They call him the creature, and he shoots an arrow directly into the one vulnerable spot on his chest, and he falls over with his first injury.
And
The
his first
storyteller,
sound.
yeah, yes, he calls out in pain, the first sound he ever makes, and the last. The storyteller tells Zhang Li that yeah, he's gonna die, and all Zhang Li can do is mock him and say, "Too bad. We'll have to depend on your stale old yarns to distract us through winter nights." The storyteller, whose name I don't think we get, is treating
No.
Cheng Wei when who should show up, but we get the impression that it's Memon.
Yeah, either that or kind of a clown type.
Maybe. But
you
the
know?
clown usually would have the blue makeup in
That's
some
true,
way.
but I
or
wonder if he
outfit.
was being more subtle back then. I don't know.
Well, he's
But
got the mustache and the slick back hair, and he kind of
yeah.
looks like Memon to me anyway. He shows up and says to Cheng Lei, I know your dreams. I can make them real. The stranger's the only one who sees the guy. He disappears, and Cheng Lei dies, and Zheng Li puts his corpse in a like cage to be picked on by
Crazy.
by animals for entertainment. Well, one day, who should ride up but a masked warrior who we immediately recognize as Mandarin Spawn, because we already know what Mandarin Spawn looks like.
Yep.
He says, I know you're in need of warriors. I will challenge your best warrior. And they send out their fighter, whose name is Yang Shi. They say, summon Yang Shi. Yang Shi tries to fight Mandarin Spawn, but Mandarin Spawn cuts him in half so hard that he cuts off his arm too. Honestly, okay, the parts of this that I like, ironically, are the parts where it's Spawn slashing people up, because
totally.
this gets into just like horror movie violence that doesn't
and also
so
it
pointed.
feels justified that
It does. It feels absolutely justified.
You tortured the shit out of me in life, I'm going to kill you.
This is another reason though that I do not like the visual parallel to a real human being who suffered so much and whose entire legacy is his suffering, that I don't love the implication that someone who goes through so much, their heart's desire would be to enact violence
Bet on
others.
somebody else. Yeah.
And I get it. It is not an angel coming to him and saying, I can grant you paradise. It is a little literal devil coming to him and saying, I can grant your wishes by appealing directly to his most base urges. So the Zhang Li is very impressed and says, you'll have Yang's place as my bodyguard. What's your name? And Mandarin Spawn here says, I've been called many things. My mother named me Cheng Lei. And we get this moment of recognition from the storyteller. I
Yeah.
love that panel because the acting in the face sells it so perfectly.
It's really good.
This look of recognition. So they go inside and they're feasting, and it's basically, it becomes sort of a red wedding scenario. Mandarin Spawn, they asked him to remove his mask. He says, I do not eat in company. My face is scarred with the wounds of many battles. The sadistic daughter asks, your opponents, the men who inflicted the scars? And he says, I've taken an oath that no one who injures me will live to boast of it. And Zhang Li says, we think alike, my friend. There's no room for mercy in the hearts of great men, no room for sentiment. We must be hard and cold as steel. And we know that that is this typical sadistic strongman attitude. Like,
Yeah.
I'm above everything but violence. Violence is the only true form of communication. And he says, Cheng Lei says, I agree, and draws his sword. The guard says to sheath it, and Zhang Li says, nonsense. I'm sure he doesn't intend to use it on me. He holds out the sword and says, you see how perfect this blade is? And then the storyteller says, there was perhaps the faintest blur of movement, but the blade was too fast for the eye to follow. And we see, he says, see how perfect this blade is? Cold, hard steel, no mercy. And observe, not a single drop of blood. Someone says, blood? Why would there be blood? And we get this actually pretty cool 3-panel shot
Yeah.
of a line forming across the sadistic daughter's neck, and her head just like pops off. This is like classic 80s gonzo anime, like
super fun.
Head launching off in a fucking fountain of blood. This is like the Reanimator type of Spawn violence I like.
Yeah.
He proceeds to basically red wedding everyone. The governor calls out his daughter's death, about his daughter's death. He says, who are you? And he says, a man, Governor Zhang, a man without mercy. And we get this super slick splash page of him just hacking people to bits.
I love
like
the guy
Uma
who's
Thurman in Kill Bill.
who's just had the top of his head sliced off.
Oh yeah, and one guy's head is sliced open. This is the kind
There's
of
an
like
eyeball flying out and one from
absolutely
one guy.
cartoonish Spawn violence that I sign up for. I don't like the deeply traumatic, like torture stuff.
Yeah.
Especially just, I don't know. There's something that really weighs on me heavily about the legacy of a real person who
I hear that.
went through probably as much profound suffering as any human being ever has. And so the storyteller is kind of lamenting and sort of saying like, wow, he must have taken inspiration from all the stories of demons and heroes I told him. And then we find out that of everyone in the place, it says he slew them all. He took his revenge on every hand that was ever raised against him, every tongue that cursed him or spat on him, every eye that once cast a look of contempt on his twisted body. Of all the men and women in this place, only I was spared, says the storyteller. Now, okay, here's the thing. I don't mind the idea of hardcore vengeance. We've talked about before, there are very cathartic elements of it. We discussed that throughout that last Armageddon arc of Spawn, where he's just like super invincible and shit. It's so cool, and I love that. Again, the more I unpack it, I keep coming back to just not liking that sort of fictionalization
the framing of the
and
origin.
I get the point is so that viewers will immediately know without being told, if they know what the Elf Man looks like, there's a human being in here.
Yeah. I think we're learning a lot about David Hines' approach, and this is why I kind of called him a mercenary earlier, is like, yeah, he feels like he's writing those kind of inventory stories, like he doesn't feel like he has the same investment that we got from Todd, obviously, and then Todd and Brian Holguin soon after.
Well, he
It
feels more like a
feels
guy who's been hired to write a comic
that's what I mean. Like he
than
feels
a guy
like
who's like an ideological part of that comic's makeup. And
yeah,
that's fine. That's what most comics are.
true. I do think though that we typically have gotten like better runs from creators who either have an extremely high skill level and are able to be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna like do my own thing here, uh, and I'm gonna use this canvas, or from folks who are like, oh, I'm obsessed with this. Maybe my skill level is not at the at all time, but I am obsessed with the character. I'm obsessed with this world of the story, and so I'm
Well,
going to make sure that I do it justice. Hein
we've
feels a
talked
little bit
before about that's
disconnected.
also how a double-edged sword, and it
Yeah,
does feel like David Hines on the other side of it. Now, the ending of this, I love the colors in particular on
yeah,
these last couple pages. We see it's the winter and the cage where where Cheng Lei's corpse once was. Zhang Li is now inside of it. It says that he died of fear. He was the only one who wasn't physically wounded in the massacre. Now, the storyteller is one of the few people who lives in the small portions of the palace that have not fallen to ruin. And outside, hanging in that cage, is now Zhang Li, almost nude. And it says that nothing comes to devour him, no prey or no predators, no
maggots or worms or
maggots or
anything.
scavengers. He doesn't even rot or decay, but people come and poke at him and try to injure him to see what happens. And so he is basically cursed to have something like Cheng Lei's curse. He seemingly feels everything but doesn't suffer injury.
Yeah,
So he is there to eternally be poked and prodded and tortured. Again, I don't love that so much. I don't know. I
I
get it.
mean, I
I
get
get
it
the
as like
twist.
a parable of like, oh,
Sure.
the.
Sure. It's again, I have an aversion to torture stuff. It's come
Fair.
up a few times. Anyway, the end of this is also kind of tough. The spawn leads a legion of other spawns and like hell warriors back into hell in a portal. And I like this panel of them all riding through. But with him, he has Zheng Li's daughter, who has a ribbon around her neck,
Yeah.
obviously holding her head on. And it ends with him sitting in hell with her on the throne next to him, holding his hand. And it says, according to legend, the warrior rules his own corner of hell with his concubine at his side. And when they make love, his passion knows no bounds. And
I
I mean,
mean,
he basically takes her to Epstein Island in hell. Like he's kidnapping this woman and turning her into his sexual object
yeah, it's
as
not great.
vengeance. I hate that. I legitimately hate that.
Yeah.
That is something I think probably could have not been written.
They
I
also
get it.
go. They
It's
also
not an
go.
unused trope.
They also go out of their way in that final panel. Like, if you did not get this, the eyes are
Yeah.
different. His two eyes are a little bit
Yes.
different to
They
really
look like
drive
his eyes.
home.
Yes,
Yeah.
that it is
Yeah.
specifically him.
Yeah.
I don't
I.
love
You
the ending. And
know.
look, when did Sleepy Hollow come out? Like 2003, 1999. There's some reminiscence of the ending of that movie where the horseman drags the villainess to hell with him. There's some of that in the portal. They're all on horses. You can see how they might have gotten there. It's also not the only time either of those is the only time that trope has been used. It caps it off in a way that, like, again, cool splash page visually with the art, the storytelling's great,
Yeah.
but I just could have done without that.
I hear
And
you.
these are two rough issues. We managed to get through it with a full length episode, which I'm really happy about. And I feel like we had a valuable discussion throughout. But at the same time, boy, it's frustrating to have two in a row that just feel mean on some level.
Yeah.
They just feel like mean spirited issues.
I mean, I feel like we're already in final thoughts, but
Yeah,
these are
go ahead.
definitely two of my least favorite issues so far. And it's not for any particular reason other than kind of what you said. Like, they just feel mean. They feel, they feel like I feel bad actually saying this the way that I think it'll come off, but it feels like Hein is the Wikipedia writer, kind of, like he's kind of like getting to the quickest version of the story that you could get, and
I mean,
maybe
maybe
not diving into the nuance a little bit. And maybe I am assigning more nuance to this because maybe I care a little bit more, or maybe we've kind of discussed before, like maybe he did have some like, hey, we need you to check a few boxes here. And
well, and also I think he wanted to get to the end of the Armageddon thing so that he can maybe do something other than wrap up someone else's story.
that's fair. That's very
And
fair.
also, I guess my real final thought that I haven't already expressed, other than my frustration with these, is the real frustration is they're well crafted.
Yeah.
The art is great. They look great. I want to be engaged with these comics in a way that isn't me kind of feeling like wincing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I that's all I really have to unpack with it is they feel uncomfortable in a way that sometimes stories should, but the execution of that maybe doesn't appeal to me the way that sometimes a story like that would.
Well, and also too, Al Simmons is a character that presumably we like, and we've now been kind of painted into a corner of I don't know that I can say that I like this guy if this is what the
Right.
story is currently. And it is a bit frustrating because it does feel like we're kind of being batted back and forth about like what is real, what is not.
I think some of the what is not is definitely cope on our end. At
Yeah,
least I know it is for me because I don't want Al to be a person that I cannot root for.
I agree with you there. I think that I it's not that like I'm against there being stories about bad people. However, they're not typically stories that I want to spend. I mean, at this point, how many hours have we spent with Al?
Yeah.
Between reading the books and talking about it,
If
like
there was no hope of redemption for Al or no hope, and I mean, I get it. He can't have the super happy ending because then you can't have him come back.
right.
You know what I mean? Like if you send him off to his just desserts, it can be tough to then, readers might really hate it if you tear that away from him later. Like
Yeah,
if
but at
if
the
Peter
same
Parker and
time,
Mary Jane got back together
which they
and
have.
they didn't immediately pull them apart again, the next time they did pull them apart, readers would be even more pissed off. Now the problem is they keep flirting with it and they keep being
Yeah.
like, not touching you. But it's like almost even in a more fundamental way with Spawn, his whole story is that he doesn't get what he wants.
Yeah.
And I don't mind the idea that he doesn't end up with the reward he feels he wants and deserves. But I do feel like this goes out of its way to turn Al Simmons into a bad person more than an anti-hero. And I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of an anti-hero just being like guy who's done the worst shit ever. Oh, he also saved the world once.
Well, yeah, and this whole story, this whole thing of Al Simmons as Spawn, the entire saga has been him trying to uncover a deeper truth about who he is, who he could have been in life, who he could be if he ever gets a second shot. And I think there's something kind of disappointing of him in the issue where he gets turned into a human again, being like, now I can go finally get Wanda back. Because he just resets back to that. But I think it would be even more tragic if, say, he had seen Wanda and Terry
And decided
have
not to go back.
have that argument or
Yeah.
whatever, and Wanda says, "Well, I'll never love Al more than you because Al." Again, I said it earlier. Have her say something like, "Al knew that he could die when he left, and I made peace with that, but he didn't. He couldn't accept the risk he put both of us into, so he came back and caused us more hurt. I
Yeah.
cannot love him more than you because you have been here by my side. All he did was help clean up a mess that he brought that family into.
Right.
Yes, he wound up saving the world, but
he owed them in a way.
more than anything.
Yeah. And to your point too, it kind of might have been interesting to see Al do a bit of a like thank you tour, right? Go see
Yeah.
Sam and Twitch. Go find Bobby, you know?
What would have really been right to me, we talked about like, oh, he gets hit by a car, whatever the fuck, something like that, some big twist. Would have really felt like closure to me to where we can move on to the next Hellspawn as we're supposed to, is if Al was like, okay, you know what? I have life. I am looking now at the fact that Wanda got a second chance after I died. This has to be my second chance. I don't have any ties to heaven or hell. My second chance has to be me letting her truly move on. I have truly matured and learned enough to know I cannot go backwards. Whatever happens, you can't go backwards. Even coming out of Armageddon, he can't go backwards. He has to build the world again. And it's different in the sense that it has a new place in cosmology. He makes new rules. It's not just back to the same status quo. The only way out is through. And we've said that a lot in late recent episodes. This feels like the only way forward is nothing. It feels a little nihilistic towards Al. And,
it's a little bit of a reset, right? He ends exactly where we met him pretty much, right? In a throne, in an alley.
And even that could have been done without making him
a villain,
a fucking pariah, a brutal abuser who is guilty of causing the death of his own child.
Yeah.
Which I just can't, I don't like that. It's tragedy that didn't need to be there for the story to be tragic. And it takes away from the idea of actual pathos
and redemption, right? Like Al's whole thing.
Do I really want to just watch him try to get redemption for fucking abusing his wife? I wouldn't have tuned into that comic necessarily.
Agreed.
I think that's really what it is. I wouldn't have necessarily started Spawn or enjoyed starting Spawn if that is what the story was at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we'd be doing the show if that was who the character was at the outset. It'll be interesting to see how. I mean, we've got David Hine for 19 more issues.
I mean, we're not. That's not me saying we shouldn't cover this now, or I don't want to continue. Of course. But just if we're putting a point on it, that's how it feels. As if that's who Al Simmons was, I wouldn't have been able to follow him for the previous 160 plus issues.
Yeah, it definitely makes it tough. So, well, I think we've said all that we can say about these two. I know that we didn't really bring up Mandarin Spawn in the final thoughts, but the final thoughts on Mandarin Spawn are there's a Mandarin Spawn issue, and
it's fine. I don't mind the one and done. Like, let's check in on a Spawns.
Yeah,
I think those are great interludes.
We'll see Gunslinger soon. So
yeah, so I don't mind those as like when it's time to break it up or bring in a guest artist.
Yeah,
we just flash back to another Spawn. I'm fine with that. I think I made my specific uncomfortabilities with that.
Yeah. Totally. Well, George, before we go, do you have any recommendations for our listeners this week?
I don't know if I've ever recommended this before. Maybe I have, but I'm going to recommend Ngozi Family. It's a band. That's Ngozi, Ngozi Family. They are from Zambia, and they are one of the, let's say, premier Zamrock bands. You know Zamrock? I really can't remember if I've talked about this. I may have recommended this 100.
I don't think you have.
Zamrock is a Zambian form of like garage rock, punk, proto metal that rose up in, I want to say, the 70s. I'm going to verify that real quick because there was like, it was the 70s. There was sort of a cultural revolution happening in Zambia where the president at the time declared that all music that was played on the radio or broadcast in Zambia, 90% of it had to be produced within Zambia. And so overnight, a lot of international bands, American, European bands, vanished from the radio, and a whole subculture of rock sprung up, like rock and roll, sprung up in Zambia based on capturing the sounds that have been taken from them in their own way with their own kind of cultural lens. My favorite is Ngozi Family. I also love Witch. There are a bunch of really good ones, but yeah, highly recommend it. It's just really cool, fun music that if you like shit like Black Sabbath and maybe like even some of the heavier like the Beatles and stuff like that, just kind of with a really fun, like very rooted in the actual like musical culture of Zambia. I highly recommend it. I think you can find there's a short documentary. I'm sure there's more than one on YouTube about Zamrock. But yeah, dig into some Zamrock, especially Ngozi Family. Expand your horizons of music. Listen to music where you don't understand the lyrics.
Hell yeah, I love that. My recommendation will probably also
They do
be
sing in English there, but so you will understand most of Ngozi Family's lyrics. But you know,
I will also recommend some music. Just was listening to on my run today. One of my favorite bands ever, Hop Along.
oh yeah,
Formerly Hop Along Queen Ancillus, but specifically the record Bark Your Head Off Dog.
I remember Hop Along.
Yeah, one of the best. They're so good. If you dig like emo, but with a singer who's got like a sort of Regina Spektor Bjork thing going on sometimes,
Yeah,
you'll have a good time. Very dynamic, very, very fun. Some good kind of grooves in there. Has the bassist from Algernon Cadwallader. And
okay.
yeah, I don't know. Great band. Haven't put a record out in 8 years at this point. But Bark Your Head Off
They're
Dog.
the
Really,
tool
really
of
good.
indie music.
Oh, who would be the tool of indie music?
I guess there are a lot of tools in indie music.
Ah, nice.
Speaking of indie music, while we're recommending music, I just want to say once again, I haven't said it in a while. Go check out my band, La Cigarette. It means the cigarette in French. You can find us at coolbutrude.com or lacigarette.bandcamp.com. We've got a couple songs out now. If you like kind of really fast moving punk rock, then, kind of check it out.
Hell yeah. Great tunes. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. We really appreciate it. Tell your friends. And George, before we go, for Todd to love the world.
He gave his only begotten spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn. Spawnography is recorded in Athens, Georgia, and Queens, New York. It's produced by me, Pierce Lyden. Our theme music and logo were composed by George Marston. Episodes come out every Monday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe. You can find us on social media at Spawnography or at SpawnographyPod. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can do so at spawnographypod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, see you later, Hellspawn.
I swear, I never saw a more perfect evening. Sorry, I was going to try and do it intense, and that sounds stupid. I'll try again.
All right. Action.